Hello, and welcome to some Dodge family history. This is where I present information and research on my ancestors who served in the military during the early 20th century. Today, I will be presenting on the official military personnel file of 2nd Lieutenant Berenice Elizabeth Newitt of the Army Nurse Corps. Berenice Elizabeth Newitt was born on February 24, 1902, at Leadville, Colorado. She was the daughter of James Newitt and Maggie Meter. Her mother passed away on February 25, 1904, at Leadville. In 1906, James Newitt remarried and was wedded to Rachel Elizabeth Dodge, my great-great-aunt. Bernice spent her time growing up in Leadville and Buena Vista. On the left is the first piece of information from her official military personnel file, also known as her 201 file. This is a photo of Bernice, taken in 1924 while she was stationed at Fitzsimons General Hospital in Denver, Colorado. By 1919, Bernice was attending nursing school at the Red Cross Hospital in Salida. She was one of 7 nurses who graduated from the Red Cross Hospital on July 27, 1920. At 18 years old, she was the youngest of her graduating class. In December of 1920, Bernice passed her state exams and became a registered nurse. The newspaper, the Salida Record, from February 4, 1921, reads, Miss Berenice Newitt, a graduate nurse of the Red Cross Hospital at Salida, was the recent guest of Dr. George E. Newell and family of this city. Miss Newitt departed Saturday night for Denver, where she will continue to follow her chosen profession. In November of 1921, Bernice submitted her application for the Army Nurse Corps. She was accepted into the Army Nurse Corps and assigned as a reserve nurse at Fitzsimons General Hospital in Denver. Some of the requirements to join the Army Nurse Corps were that the applicant be a graduate from a civilian nursing school, that the applicant be female, white, and single. In 1920, Army nurses were authorized relative rank in the grades of second lieutenant to major. Army nurses were entitled to wear the insignia of their rank. However, they were to be addressed as Miss or Nurse, and their pay was approximately half that of a male officer of the same rank. With her acceptance into the Army Nurse Corps, Bernice's official military personnel file, or 201 file, was started. Because she was a commissioned officer, her 201 file was unaffected by the 1973 National Archives fire. I received a copy of her 201 file from the National Archives at St. Louis in 2019. As a side note, all 201 files that are more than 62 years old are available to the public by request. In addition to her photograph, her file contains the following information: letter of appointment, application, physical examinations, transfers and orders, extensions of appointment, requests for transfer and furlough, communications including telegrams and cablegrams, retirement proceedings, statement of military service, and report of separation. On her application, shown here, Bernice lists her date of birth as February 24, 1899. She increased her age by 3 years because she was likely too young to join the Army Nurse Corps. Without a birth record, this information she provided was readily accepted. There are many subsequent records that verify her year of birth as 1902, including her Social Security number application and death record. But the earliest record that shows she was not born until after 1900 is the 1910 U.S. Census. The 1900 U.S. Census, inset on the top right, lists her father, mother, and older brother, who was born in July of 1899. The 1910 Census, inset at the bottom right, lists Bernice, who was then 8 years old, with her father, stepmother, brother, and younger sister. The second page of her application, shown here on the left, asks about her education and nursing experience. She attended grade school in Buena Vista and later Leadville High School. She attended nursing school at the Red Cross Hospital in Salida, where she was in training for 3 years. The Red Cross Hospital was a private hospital with 60 beds. She listed her date of graduation as December 15, 1920. She was a member of the American Nursing Association and was a registered nurse. The record on the right is from the Colorado State Archives. It is dated December 1920 and is the record of her state registered nurse examinations. This record shows her registered certificate number 3248 and matches the certificate number shown on the application. The last page of the application asks about Bernice's nursing experience. She states that she had been doing private duty as a nurse since graduation from nursing school, and that this was her first time applying for employment in the nursing service of the United States. Bernice is listed in the 1921 Kansas City, Missouri directory, shown at bottom left, as a nurse. On the application, she lists her father, James Newitt, as her next of kin, who was living at Grand Junction, Colorado. Bernice was accepted into the Army Nurse Corps on November 24, 1921. She was appointed reserve nurse, administered the oath of office, and assigned to Fitzsimons General Hospital in Denver. Fitzsimons General Hospital opened in 1918 and was originally known as General Hospital No. 21. From the website coloradoencyclopedia.org, it was named after Lieutenant William Thomas Fitzsimons, a civilian surgeon serving as an Army medical officer who was the first U.S. Army officer killed in World War I. Throughout the 1920s, Fitzsimons admitted and discharged about 300 patients per month. It cared for Army veterans suffering from tuberculosis and also served as a general hospital for active military personnel and veterans in the Denver area. Bernice remained at Fitzsimons General Hospital until 1925. On September 11, 1925, she requested transfer to Letterman General Hospital in San Francisco. Her request was approved. She was also granted a leave of absence through October 8, 1925. Her request and endorsements, documented in her 201 file, are shown here. The first endorsement states that her services and general conduct have always been excellent. However, the third endorsement of her request states that she was to proceed to her next assignment at her own expense. At the time of her requested transfer, her brother, as well as a step-aunt, who had also been a nurse, were living in San Francisco. On March 12, 1926, Bernice requested to be relieved from her duty as a reserve nurse and appointed as a nurse in the Army Nurse Corps. Her request, shown on the left, was granted. She was relieved from her position as a reserve nurse on March 15, 1926, and appointed as nurse on March 16, 1926. A copy of the special order authorizing her appointment as nurse is shown on the right. A new letter of appointment was issued, and a new oath of office was administered. The new letter of appointment, shown on the left, indicates that Bernice previously served as a member of the Army Nurse Corps, that she had executed her oath as a reserve nurse, and that she was relieved from duty as a reserve nurse. Her first letter of appointment specifically indicated that she was appointed as a reserve nurse in the Army Nurse Corps, while this new letter of appointment only indicates that she is appointed to the Army Nurse Corps. Bernice also completed and submitted a new application, which asked the same questions as the first application. On this new application, however, she listed her year of birth as 1900. Information was requested as to the discrepancy in her year of birth. Again, because there was no birth record issued, she stated that her correct year of birth was 1900. It is likely that even though she was now over 21 years old, she did not want to give away her real year of birth and risk losing her appointment in the Army Nurse Corps for initially joining while she was underage. Bernice served at Letterman General Hospital until November of 1927. On November 2, 1927, she sailed aboard the U.S. Army transport St. Mihiel with 3 other nurses for Hawaii, where she arrived on November 8th. Bernice was assigned to the station hospital at Schofield Barracks. In March of 1929, she requested continuation of her military service, as her initial appointment was for 3 years. Her request was approved, and the first endorsement of her request states that Miss Newitt is conscientious, energetic, and a capable nurse. Her physical examination from 1929 also documented some minor hearing problems for the first time. She was referred to medical treatment for chronic otitis media. This would not be the last time her hearing would be a concern to her ability to perform her duties as an Army nurse. On March 12, 1930, Bernice requested transfer to an eastern station. She stated that she had been on duty in Hawaii since November 8, 1927. In addition to her request, she submitted a separate letter requesting transfer to Walter Reed Medical Center. She also requested a leave of absence upon her arrival back at the States and prior to her next assignment. Her requests were each approved. She was to travel by transport back to the United States in July of 1930, where her leave of absence would commence. Following expiration of her leave of absence, she was to take an Army transport and sail from San Francisco to Brooklyn, and from there proceed to Walter Reed. On June 6, 1930, she requested change of her travel from San Francisco to Brooklyn, asking that she be allowed to travel overland instead of sailing aboard an Army transport. This additional request was approved. Shown here is the correspondence from her 201 file regarding her request for transfer back to the States. She sailed aboard the U.S. Army transport St. Mihiel on July 1st of 1930 and arrived back at San Francisco on July 7th, 1930. After arriving back in the States, Berenice commenced her leave of absence, which ran from July through early November of 1930. She stopped at Fort Snelling, Minnesota on November 4th, 1930. While here, her orders were changed. She was relieved from her assignment at Walter Reed and reassigned to Fort Snelling, Minnesota. The endorsements on this reassignment read as follows. It is recommended that Second Lieutenant Berenice E. Newitt, Nurse, Army Nurse Corps, now on leave of absence at Fort Snelling, Minnesota, be relieved from further assignment and station at Walter Reed General Hospital, Army Nurse Corps, Washington, D.C., and directed, upon the expiration of her present leave of absence, to report in person to the surgeon, Station Hospital, Fort Snelling, for assignment to duty. Reason: nurses are being assigned to duty at Fort Snelling, and Miss Newitt will be part of their quota. She has been on leave of absence in the United States since her return in July from a tour of service in Hawaii, and has had continuous service in the Corps since November 24, 1921. Following approval of these endorsements, Berenice was reassigned to Fort Snelling following completion of her leave of absence on November 6, 1930. Her assignment at Fort Snelling began on November 12, 1930. On November 17, 1931, Berenice submitted a request to be considered for service in the Philippines. Her request was approved, but she was never transferred. In 1932, and again in 1935, she requested continuation of her service in the Army Nurse Corps. Both requests were approved. She also took leaves of absence in December of 1931, October of 1932, and May and June of 1934. Her physical examinations continued each year. The only issue that came up with her physical exams was her hearing, which was found not to interfere with her military service. In March of 1935, Berenice contracted German measles. The clinical records from her 201 file read, had measles which began on February 28th, diagnosed German measles. On March 4, first noticed bleeding from her nose and bleeding spots in her mouth and on her tongue. On March 5, 1935, nosebleed most of the day and also her gums. First noticed spots on her legs and arms on the afternoon of the 5th. Bleeding continued until she was admitted to the hospital. On March 6, 1935, Berenice was hospitalized through March 19th, when she was discharged to her quarters, where she remained until March 20th. On March 21st, she was recovered and able to resume her duties as a nurse. Following her recovery from German measles, Berenice requested a transfer back to Letterman General Hospital, as well as requesting a leave of absence. Her address while on leave was 323 North I Street, Tacoma, Washington. Her father and stepmother had moved there from Grand Junction in 1931. Her request, as well as the endorsements, are shown here. Both requests were granted, with her leave of absence beginning on August 25, 1935. She arrived back at Letterman General Hospital on October 23, 1935. However, she had to travel back to Letterman General Hospital at her own expense. Her physical examination in 1936 indicated that her hearing had grown worse and very likely exacerbated by the case of measles she suffered from the year before. While noted as having defective hearing, she was still able to carry out her duties. Her physical examination in 1937, however, indicated that her hearing was now defective and caused her to be incapacitated for service. A recommendation was made by the medical officers to the commanding officer of Letterman General Hospital that Berenice be brought before a retirement board. The third endorsement of this recommendation, shown on the right, reads, concurring in the findings of the Board of Medical Officers convened at Letterman General Hospital, San Francisco, California, to the effect that Second Lieutenant Berenice Newitt, Nurse, Army Nurse Corps, is permanently physically incapacitated for active service because of defective hearing. It is recommended that Second Lieutenant Berenice Newitt, Nurse, Army Nurse Corps, be ordered before an Army Retiring Board for its action. On March 26, 1937, the Retirement Board was convened. Berenice declined to be represented by counsel and declined to make any statement other than it was her desire to be retired from military service. Evidence of her physical examination dated March 25, 1937, was entered into evidence, and 2 doctors, who both had conducted the exam, testified that her hearing loss was incident to her military service, and that her hearing loss was permanent. The hearing found that Berenice was diagnosed with otosclerosis, severe bilateral incapacitating. Following the conclusion of the retirement board, Berenice submitted a request for a leave of absence to use her accrued leave. She had 101 days of accrued leave. Her request was granted. She was granted a leave of absence from April 21st, 1937 through July 31st, 1937, at which date she would be retired from military service. Along with requesting this leave of absence, she requested permission to visit Europe during her leave of absence. This request was also granted. The newspaper, the News Tribune, from Tacoma, Washington, dated May 27, 1937, reports, Mr. and Mrs. James Newitt of the Biltmore Apartments have with them both their daughter and son, Miss Berenice Newitt, who leaves Friday for an extensive trip, and Keith Newitt, here from San Francisco until after June 1st. Miss Newitt, a nurse in government service for the past 16 years, has planned a vacation that will last until autumn. She sails from New York June 4th on the Laconia for Europe and will not return until September. Berenice left the United States aboard the SS Laconia on June 4, 1937 from New York and arrived at Liverpool, England on June 14th. She remained overseas until July 9th, returning to the United States aboard the SS Britannic. She arrived back in New York on July 18, 1937. The ship manifest from the SS Britannic, shown at top, lists her correct date of birth, February 24, 1902. She was retired from the Army Nurse Corps on July 31, 1937. On the left is a copy of her Statement of Military Service taken from her 201 file. Her Statement of Military Service gives her date of birth, showing the incorrect year of birth, gives her date and place of appointment, her date of retirement, and length of service. Berenice served a total of 15 years, 8 months, and 8 days in the Army Nurse Corps. Following her retirement from military service, Berenice continued her nursing career, first in San Francisco and then in Glendale, California, where she worked at the Physicians and Surgeons Hospital and then at Monte Sano Hospital. Berenice retired from nursing in the early 1960s. She passed away at the VA Medical Center in Sepulveda, California on September 7, 1982, and is buried at the Riverside National Cemetery. She never married and was survived by her younger sister, Edna Newitt Patterson, who was also a nurse. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and found it informative. I am glad that Berenice's 201 file still exists and that I am able to share it with everyone. Her photo, which was included in her 201 file and shown in this presentation, is a gem of a find, as my family did not have a picture of her prior to receiving her 201 file. My next presentation will look at additional military records that are available for Berenice Newitt that supplement her 201 file. Thank you.